The final teasers of the new episode are here, and in less than 24 hours we will be able to watch it. So let's take a quick look at all the hidden details of the latest teasers and summarize the final episode. The first thing that is immediately noticeable is Caine in the image of the sun, and so far, nothing is clear. But remember the strange image on the fresco that I told you about many times, and now we can clearly see that it was Caine. Which means my theory that Caine created Candy Canyon Kingdom for entertainment is completely correct. We also see Jax and Ragatha, and somewhere in the other direction lies Pomni. We've seen various glitches happen in the amazing digital circus a few times now, and this is another example. In this image, Pomni is stuck in the textures, just like Gummy Goo in the previous teaser. And while Jax and Ragatha are looking at Candy Castle with great interest, I wondered, where is Gangle? And judging by the fact that we understand that this teaser is a farewell scene, then most likely Gangle is still inside the Candy Castle and is eating the sweets that Princess Lulilalu has prepared for them. The second teaser is also a thumbnail of the second episode. In addition to all the characters, except Zubel of course, we see a very strange weapon in the hands of Jax, and apparently it will be his second weapon. And first we saw a sweet shotgun, which can most likely shoot candy bullets, but this device can only repel opponents with his shoe. And judging by the fact that the Gummy Goo gang does not wear shoes, and among all the characters of the circus only Pomni and Ragatha have shoes, and I'm not sure about Ragatha, and this shoe is completely different from what we see, then most likely Jax just picked it up somewhere and added it to his weapon. Now let's talk about everything else. Let's take a look at all the leaks we've seen recently. On the 7th of April, Gooseworx told us, "I hope people are ready for the rest of TADC to be nothing like the pilot." And at the time, a lot of people didn't know what that meant. But just yesterday, she showed us a snippet of a new track that will be the intro to the second episode. Let's listen to it, but as it's quite long, I'm going to speed it up a few times. And right away you can see a gradual build-up from a calm rhythm to an anxious state. It's as if this soundtrack would be perfect for the opening teaser of the first season. Or maybe it's the track that was playing in Jax's headphones in one of Gooseworx's posts. But the important thing to take from this is that the new episode is indeed complete, and we can expect more and more digital circus in the near future. Our friends of Glitch's team have not wasted any time either, and after 2 weeks of posts about the new episode of Murder Drones, they have finally presented us with a post about the second episode of the digital circus. The caption for this photo goes something like, something's missing. And there is indeed something missing. We can clearly see Pomni, Caine, Ragatha, and Kinger. Maybe a new episode is missing. But what I'm most excited about is the Ferris wheel, where Caine is riding our characters with a disgruntled look on his face. And the oldest subscribers to my channel will remember that I said in one of my videos that the amusement park could be one of the new locations for the new episode. And apparently I was right. I think that this is only a small part of what this place has to offer. And in the new episode, we can reveal it not just as a place for entertainment, but as an integral part of the life of the circus, where our characters spend a lot of time to distract themselves from all the horrors they experience living in the tent of the digital circus. Glitch showed us the final teaser of the second episode, which will appear on May 3rd. And I am 99% sure that this scene is just a joke and will not be shown to us in the new episode. We can immediately notice that Kinger and Gangle are locked inside some slot machine, and Caine is watching them closely while Pomni and Gummy Goo are standing somewhere behind them. But if you look closely, you'll notice that these two have clearly gotten much smaller than they are. And why exactly are they locked up? Maybe it's a reference to the pilot episode where Kinger and Gangle were in the same group during the search for Zubel. Or maybe Caine decided to show a lottery in which the loser will be the main loser of the new episode, and whoever Caine draws first will be doomed to the greatest suffering among all the inhabitants of the digital circus in the second episode, and I'm sure it will be Gangle. However, let's not forget Pomni and the alligator. We immediately see that half of Gummy Goo's body is stuck in the textures, while Pomni watches in horror. I think that this scene is a kind of a mirror in which Gummy Goo suffers already, and not Pomni, who was badly abused by the alligator in the new episode. Everyone remembers how Caine sent Gangle, Pomni, and Ragatha to Candy Canyon Kingdom. However, many people did not notice that Jax and Kinger also went along with them. However, some leaks may assure us that Kinger and Jax may have been there before, but more on that later. I would like to note that in none of the trailer fragments, I didn't see Zubel in the digital circus, and in general during the whole trailer, she was shown only once, and that at the moment of quarrel with Caine. Let's remember how in the pilot episode there was already something similar when Zubel refused to take part in Caine's riveting and was punished. Is it possible that in the second episode we may be shown another of Caine's punishments? Also in one of the trailer fragments, only Gangle, Pomni, and Ragatha were on the territory of the circus, and we can be sure that Jax and Kinger were sent there much earlier than the rest of the circus inhabitants. And if you haven't wondered why this was done, I'll tell you why. We all know that Kinger is the craziest resident of the circus, and it is always unclear what to expect from him, and despite the fact that he can be scared of any sound, but he can also show himself on the contrary with a very brave side that we were shown in the announcement of the first season. And Jax, I think it's clear to most people, he is the bravest and most curious character we have seen, and I think he volunteered to go there first, at least because of curiosity. There's also the possibility that Jax himself chose Kinger as a partner. Now what was that for? Remember Caine's pleased and strange face when he sent the last circus people to Candy Canyon Kingdom? It may seem like a joy, and that would be true, but what I am sure of is that it is more of a misunderstanding of what will happen to them next. Most likely Caine and Princess Lulilalu know each other well because they are both administrators of their locations, which are interconnected, and it is likely that the princess warned Caine that there is a gang of Gumagoo in the kingdom, and Jax and Kinger went to investigate so that everyone else could get to castle in peace, and they were generally successful at first, and even succeeded. Many people know about Gummy Elephant, but I'll just say that this character appeared long before the pilot episode of Digital Circus. And now, let's consider the arrival of our circus residents in Candy Canyon Castle itself. And many people have only noticed an obscure figure looming over the castle. I've heard many different opinions about what it might be. Some said it was the moon, some thought it was someone's eye, and to be honest, in the first few seconds I thought the same thing. I even had a theory that it was Caine watching his subjects. But I think everyone realizes that this is nonsense, and if you look from other angles, you will realize that there are quite a lot of such elements in Candy Kingdom, and they are nothing special. But what is most interesting is that on the building itself you can notice some kind of mural or sculpture. But the most interesting thing is the image that you can see there. If you zoom in on this image, you can see an image that looks like Caine's face. What if Caine is actually the main administrator of all the territories, and Candy Canyon Kingdom is just one of the many locations that Caine has created just to entertain our characters? But there is another theory about what this image is actually hiding. What if it's not Caine, but the king of Candy Kingdom? And accordingly, Princess Lulilalu is his daughter, and the king himself is already dead and has put the kingdom in safe hands. And judging by the fact that all the people of Candy Kingdom are happy and satisfied with life in this place, we can safely say that Princess Lulilalu is successfully coping with her role. Then we see the circus people going somewhere, and if we look at the faces of the characters, we can realize that only Jax is happy about their adventure. And also many people think that this shotgun is the weapon that Kinger held in his hands in the announcement of the first season, and this shotgun was directly stolen from someone. As you all remember, our characters arrived at Candy Canyon Kingdom on a wagon, and then they are traveling in a car. And many might think that this vehicle was presented to Kingdom, but if you look at both vehicles, you will realize that this truck was stolen from Gumagoo, because another similar truck belongs to Gumagoo and his gang. And by the way, what movie does that remind you of? And if we go back to the Gumagoo gang, we see that their favorite food is eggs and candy. And the funny thing is that their lollipops are shaped like daggers. Or maybe it's not lollipops at all, but weapons that these guys use to intimidate their enemies. Now let's have a little look at what the Gumagoo gang is doing. And immediately binoculars come into view and we realize that alligators are not just sitting in the desert. I'm sure this is their temporary lair, and they are like real thieves watching their prey. Let's take a little break from them and look at Pomni's room and our jester herself. And I think that this fragment of the trailer doesn't carry any meaning, but is just a small reference to the fact that the amazing digital circus is just a game. After all, when two objects collide, they start to move incomprehensibly, which is shown by Pomni and one of her cubes. But more valuable for us is the fact that Pomni has an extra hat and shoes in her room, besides a lot of toys. But if we take a closer look, we will realize that the size of the extra hat is much smaller than what is on Pomni's head, and it can only mean that these things are nothing more than a toy inventory. Let's go back a few weeks and remember this leak where Regatha, Jax, and Kinger are standing on the roof of something. And at that moment we didn't know what it was, but now we realize that it was one of the Gumagoo trucks that our circus performers successfully stole. And if you look at the previous parts of the trailer, it becomes clear that there was something wrong with this truck. Maybe some part of it was damaged after the collision, and apparently they had an accident. However, several questions arise immediately. Remember the fragment where Jax and Gangle are sitting on the roof of the truck and seem to be floating somewhere? And also from the same location we were shown a moment where the circus residents were able to catch one of the gang Gumagoo. I think this fragment was taken from about the middle of the second episode because then our characters will have another boss that will be much more difficult to deal with than the Gumagoo gang. Let's quickly go through the timeline of events with Gumagoo to analyze other hidden moments and new storylines of the trailer. The circus residents get to Candy Kingdom where at one point they have to leave the area and they meet the Gumagoo gang, who are apparently their targets. They then steal their truck and move on. But then the Gumagoo gang kidnap Pomni, which is clearly visible in these fragments. After that, they continue their journey with the 4 of them. After certain events, Gumagoo managed to ruin the second truck a bit, but still the circus people managed to take one of the alligators hostage. They were probably able to deal with Gumagoo afterwards, and then they were safely on their way. But it was strange that Pomni wasn't still with them. And back to the footage of Gangle and Jax. Look closely that at some point someone flies out of the water, and if you look closely, it's likely that this character is Pomni. And also pay attention to the rock that is visible behind. Few people have given it any significance at all, but no one has thought about how it might be connected to Pomni's quick departure. It's as if it was a cannonball that was fired from a cannon. We go back to the leak and remember that something similar was in the Fudge Monster location, and back to the shot where Regatha is unhappy with Jax's behavior, and most likely at the moment when they saw Pomni, Jax decided to take control, and when he saw this rock, he decided to explore what was going on there, and most likely successfully stuck there. And this place is the habitat of the Fudge Monster, which initially appeared to us to look like a crocodile, but then we see that its shape is completely different. And this may be a clear indication that the Fudge Monster has no definite shape and can become anything but, more importantly, its size. And if on this fragment we do not understand it, then here we can see that only his tail is able to lift a whole truck with all passengers. And also very interesting is the fact that Fudge Monster is able to put all those who look at him in a trance. But this is just a theory, and there is no confirmed information about it. But considering the fact that our characters returned to the castle and received their reward, I can assure you that our characters were able to get out of the Fudge Monster trap. But I just wonder how they did it. But apparently not all of them, because we see Pomni falling into that very basement and one of her hands has already started to will abstracted. But I think that it would be very stupid to deprive us of the main character almost at the beginning of the show, and therefore it will definitely not happen. I think that after Pomni flew out of the lake, she landed and lost consciousness. And because of that, she lost consciousness, which led to this vision, or maybe she was able to see the future? So far, we still don't know, and even in the second episode, it is unlikely that we will be shown the full picture of this scene. And we're left with only fragments from Candy Castle, and there's only one interesting moment, and that's the handing over of which key. There were a lot of theories about that. Some said it was the key to the city, and some said it was the key to the truck our characters were driving. But we have already talked about these points, but still, I believe that this key may be from some of the locations inside Candy Kingdom, and most likely this key will open a room that will be completely filled with various sweets that will be rewarded for successful work. There might even be maple syrup, but we will only find out on May 3rd. I would like to discuss this image that was published yesterday by Glitch. And apparently even the creators themselves did not expect such an interesting episode. But apparently on May 3rd, we will see something unimaginatively delicious. But what intrigued me much more was the image itself, where the chaos is going on. Caine, as the chef, personifies the main man in this so-called kitchen and just watches as if nothing is happening. And I think he's even happy with everything that's going on. Remember how in the trailer, we were shown Gangle with a comedy mask, and even though during the whole adventure in Candy Canyon, Gangle was sad, but at the end we see a smile on her mask again, and we all thought that this episode could be a happy one for Gangle. But with just one leak, Glitch crushed all our hopes, and I think Gangle was not chosen by chance. Look closely and you'll see a cake that appears to be the culprit of this fire. And this cake symbolizes the happiness that was supposed to wait for our characters in Candy Canyon Kingdom. But together with it, the hope for a happy future of the circus inhabitants was burned. And Gangle's face at this moment literally screams to us about it. It is also worth mentioning Pomni, who in her usual gloomy state just resigned herself to the fact that something terrible will be waiting for her in the new episode. This shot reminds me of something. And for fun, I'll add that in this image, Pomni reminds me of a candle that is about to burst into flames and completely burn out. Maybe that's what the creators are trying to tell us. And Regatha just froze, waiting for what will happen next, and apparently her mental state is already so badly damaged that nothing can surprise her. Caine isn't the only one happily watching what's going on around her. Behind all the characters, we can see the silhouette of the already known crocodile Gumagoo, and he is probably even more happy than Caine. And as we remember from the trailer, Gumagoo is the main anti-hero of the new episode, and in the previous video we assumed that their confrontation will end peacefully. But Glitch clearly hinted that Gumagoo is not so simple and that he will be ready to do anything to get rid of our characters. And most likely, he will do it. Another fun leak is this image of Caine holding the other characters in his hat. I didn't expect anything else from Gangle, Regatha, and Pomni are the only ones who are scared of such an amazing trick from Caine. Kinger doesn't understand anything, and Jax is not happy with what's going on. And as you can see, the events take place in Candy Canyon Kingdom, but since during the whole trailer we saw Caine only 2 times, we can assume that this scene will be waiting for us at the end of the episode. And if you've been watching closely, you'll know that the background shows the Candy Castle wall from the inside. And this is the first leak that refers us to the castle interior. However, the most valuable thing about this image is the description. "We so back." We are told by the developers, and there are two theories here about what this could mean. Perhaps this is just Glitch's way of stating that news about the digital circus will now be released with the same intensity as before. Or maybe it's a reference to Caine, because as you remember I said that this scene will be at the end of our adventure, so it could be Caine and Bubble making a statement. I'm sure that all these sweets will be given to our characters for passing the test in Candy Canyon Kingdom. And since we already have a lot of information about what we can expect in the new episode and even some hints about the fate of the characters in the second episode, let's take a look at some options for the development of events. And we would like to start with Pomni, because we realize that this character is probably the most unhappy in the new episode. After all, even Gangle, whose joy mask broke again, was much less horrified than our favorite Pomni. As you remember, Pomni was initially against the new adventure because she had enough of the pilot episode. But Caine doesn't care about that, and he forcefully sends everyone to Candy Canyon, and everything was going well initially. But then Gumagoo and his gang stole her, then an unforgettable trip on the roof and a dizzying merry-go-round. And Pomni experienced what it's like to be a projectile fired from a cannon. And that's how we got to the main part of Pomni, abstraction. I think everyone was confused by this fragment, because the pilot episode showed us the same thing, but to a much lesser extent. Pomni's hand will abstract it again, and it's not a joke because we see the fall into the same basement that Kaufmo once fell into. And whether Pomni can really leave the amazing digital circus already in the new episode. And if we take this image seriously, then such a possibility exists. Because as I said before, we can clearly see Pomni's mental state, which has already been shaken in the pilot episode. I told you once before that it would be a complete nonsense if Pomni really turns into an abstracted monster already on May 3rd, and it is unknown how it will affect later episodes, so it is safe to say that Glitch and Gooseworx will not risk that much. I have two theories about the origin of this fragment. Everyone remembers that before Caine broke into Pomni's room, our girl was sleeping peacefully, so we can't deny the fact that turning into an abstracted monster and falling into the basement is just a scary dream after everything that happened on the first day in the digital circus tent. But on the other hand, it may not be a dream, but a hallucination that Pomni could have experienced on two occasions. Everyone remembers the first appearance of Fudge Monster in the trailer, and I experienced a very strange sensation while watching it. And if you watched my last video carefully, you remember how I said that Fudge Monster may have the ability to hypnotize the other characters, and therefore who prevents him to hypnotize Pomni and make her feel all this horror, and then just throw her out of the water. I mean, theoretically this character could live anywhere in Candy Canyon Kingdom. Or something else threw Pomni out of the water so hard, and of course she ended up falling, and maybe she hit her head on landing and lost consciousness, and that's when she thought she was becoming what Kaufmo had become. Also, I can't help but mention Gangle, who was very happy at first because she had a comedy mask on her face, but then we see that this mask disappeared again. And if we look at the first fragments of the characters in Candy Canyon Kingdom, we can see that the comedy mask is still there, but as soon as they drove the truck, we are shown that Gangle is back to her usual state. But what happened to the comedy mask, and why is it back to Gangle if it was still broken at the end of the pilot episode? Judging by the leaks, we understand that it is impossible to glue this mask together without being noticed, and in this case, I have only one option left: Caine. He created a new mask for Gangle so that during the journey through Candy Canyon, Gangle would not finally turn into a depressive character who can't do anything and doesn't want to. But at what point did the mask break? It seems to me that in the new episode, there will be a repeat of the situation of the pilot episode where Jax breaks the mask of comedy. And the reason for this may be too positive mood of Gangle, because of which she may not want to drive the truck, and thus Jax stimulated our Gangle. And also I am sure that in the third episode, Caine will again create a new mask for Gangle, and who will break it is not a secret. And judging by this leak, there is a probability that the second episode will end for Gangle on the same sad note as the pilot one. And if we've already mentioned Fudge Monster, it would be a crime not to tell about him. We know that he can hypnotize characters and change the shape of his body, and this comparison totally proves it, but how important his role will be in the new episode. Everyone remembers Gloink's Queen, right? In general, they are similar, and although Gloink's Queen was a relatively important character in the pilot episode, we could have done without her existence. And I'm sure that Fudge Monster will have a similar role, which will take up at most 2 to 3 minutes of the second episode's timeline. And I think it's obvious to everyone that Fudge Monster is a negative character. But the main role among the villains will definitely go to Gumagoo and his gang. In case you didn't know, the other two alligators are named Max and Chad. Well, since we already talked about Gumagoo and he appears on one of the leaks, let's summarize who Gumagoo is. Also, don't forget that Gooseworx directly stated that all new characters will be NPCs. which means that Gumagoo will unfortunately be a character that will appear in only one episode, and we will never see him again. Let's summarize Gumagoo as a negative character that Gooseworx will add to the new episode in order to diversify the picture of the illusory goodness that happens in Candy Canyon Kingdom. Because if you look at it objectively, few people would be interested in watching the circus residents simply traveling and exploring the Candy Kingdom and performing simple tasks for Princess Lulilalu. And it is the appearance of Gumagoo that will be the anchor that will drag the main storyline of the digital circus. As I said before, the main role of Gumagoo will be the variety of the story due to his character. I wish you success and good luck and see you soon in new videos that appear every 2 days.